Early on in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you'll arrive at Delphi and be presented with a crucial turning point in your Odyssey. In real life, Delphi was one of the most important sites in all of ancient Greece. At the Pan-Hellenic sanctuary of Apollo, worshippers from all over Greece would make pilgrimage to the hillside site and visit the high priestess of Apollo, better known as the Oracle of Delphi. Delphi's religious significance is steeped in myth. As the story goes, Zeus released two eagles flying at identical speeds from the two ends of the earth. Those eagles crossed paths over Delphi, and so Zeus deemed it the center or navel of the world. Because of this, Zeus decided to place the omphalos, or belly button stone that his father Kronos was tricked into eating, at the site of Delphi. The thing is, the site wasn't always called Delphi. Back then, it was known as Pytho, and it was home to the fearsome Python who guarded the stone and the original oracle. It wasn't until Apollo came along and defeated the Python that the sanctuary was named Delphi and rededicated to him. You'll see references to this myth all over Greece in the statues of Apollo grappling with the Python. And be sure not to miss the giant Python skeleton just outside Delphi. The influence of mythic Pythos still remains long after Apollo's intervention. The ancient Greece didn't refer to the high priestess of Apollo as an oracle, but rather as the Pythia, a direct reference to the site's origins. The Pythia was one of the most important figures in the entire ancient world. Believed to have the power to speak to the gods and decipher the future, she could influence wars, politics, and culture more than any other individual. Delphi was also one of the 4 main sites to host the Pan-Hellenic Games, competitions between all of Greece. You know, like that thing they did every 4 years in Olympia? In Delphi, these were known as the Pythian Games. Games often included musical and theatrical contests as well. Be sure to visit the theater at Delphi when you visit it in-game or in real life. Unlike Roman theaters, which were typically semicircular freestanding structures, Greek theaters often surpassed 180 degrees and were frequently built directly into the mountainside. During the 470 BCE Pythian Games, the tyrant Polyzalus emerged victorious in the chariot race. To commemorate his victory, he erected a bronze statue of a charioteer in Delphi. The statue is one of the finest examples of Greek lost wax bronze casting and can still be seen today at the Delphi Museum. Today, Delphi lies mostly in ruins, as little remains of the Temple of Apollo other than a few Doric columns. The best preserved building on the entire site? That would be the reconstructed Treasury of Athens. Treasuries were dedication offerings presented by individual cities to display their wealth and piety in comparison to other cities. Greek city-states were constantly in competition with one another. So when Athens, one of the wealthiest cities in the ancient world, erected their treasury built from the spoils of the Persian War at one of the most important religious sites in Greece, they attempted to show that they deserved Apollo's favor more than anyone else. Like many pilgrims before you, the things you learn and the people you meet at Delphi will change the course of your Odyssey forever. Athens, the birthplace of democracy and the pinnacle of ancient Greece. But how exactly did the city rise to such prominence? Remember that time the Persian Empire invaded Greece and a man named Leonidas and his 299 closest buddies helped fight them off? Well, after the war, Athens needed to be rebuilt. Under the leadership of a statesman named Pericles, they decided to build up Athens better than ever before. And it all started with their sacred hilltop known as the Acropolis. The jewel of the Acropolis was the Parthenon, arguably the most famous monument in all of ancient Greece, and one of the finest examples of Greek Doric-style temple architecture in the entire world. Built as a dedication to the goddess Athena, the Parthenon played a huge role in asserting Athens as a superpower and put the rest of Greece, especially Sparta, on notice. Today, in real life, the Parthenon is remarkably well preserved, but it definitely ain't what it used to be due to the fact that it was literally blown up by a 17th century Ottoman gunpowder keg. Be sure not to miss those Venetian cannonball dents when you visit it today. Head around to the eastern entrance to check out the ivory statue of Athena. The ancient Athenians realized that ivory cracks in dry heat, so they used the water from the pool to raise the temple's humidity and preserve the ivory statue. If you're curious to see how temples themselves were constructed, head over to the under construction Temple of Zeus. Originally meant to rival the Parthenon itself, the temple was never actually finished under Greek rule, as Athenian citizens deemed the project to be too costly. Back up on the Acropolis, be sure to visit the Erechtheion, a monument dedicated to the contest between Athena and Poseidon for patronage of the city. As the myth goes, Poseidon offered the city salt water, while Athena offered up an olive tree. Olive oil was extremely valuable in ancient Greece because of its wide variety of uses in nearly every aspect of daily life. It was so important that winners of the Pan-Athenaic Games were awarded with as many as 70 prize amphora, clay jugs filled to the brim with olive oil. Each one was easily worth its weight in drachmae. That much wealth would set up winners and their families for generations. Athenians who didn't win a lifetime supply of olive oil would have likely purchased it at the Agora. Functioning primarily as a marketplace, the Agora was a place where you could find goods from all corners of the Mediterranean. If you wanted to take a break from shopping and exercise your civic duty, you could head to the Athenian Assembly House, better known as the Boulaterion, to witness some good old-fashioned democracy as Athenian citizens, aka men who served in the military, debated the future of the city. Athens is just one of the many cities you'll come across on your Odyssey, and it'll be up to you to discover their secrets and decide their fate in the Peloponnesian War. In Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you play as a legendary warrior following mythic heroes like Heracles and Perseus. It's fitting considering that in ancient Greek society, myths played a powerful role and often influenced real life and vice versa. A perfect example of this is on the island of Crete in the Massara and Pefka regions, where you may have noticed they're somewhat fond of bulls, more specifically, minotaurs. But where exactly did this iconography come from, and why is it primarily concentrated in Crete? As it turns out, Greece has a long history before the classical period of Cassandra and Alexios, and many of the myths popularized during their time have roots in Greece's Bronze Age. When it comes to the Minotaur, look no further than the Palace of Knossos just south of Heraklion. The palace dates back to around 1700 BCE, meaning that by the time Cassandra and Alexios visit it, the ruins are already over 1300 years old. Discovered by archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans and his team in the 20th century, the site was believed to be the palace of the mythical King Minos. Evans decided to name the Bronze Age civilization after the fabled king and dubbed the people as the Minoans. But how exactly did Evans link King Minos to the Palace of Knossos? Well, as the myth goes, Minos ruled the island of Crete. After angering Poseidon, Minos' wife gave birth to a half-man, half-bull known as the Minotaur. With the help of the architect Daedalus, Minos constructed a labyrinth to house the beast, and used it to punish his enemies until an Athenian named Theseus came to slay the creature. When Evans uncovered Knossos, he and his team discovered a massive amount of bull iconography. You can find examples of this all over the regions of Massara and Pefka. Believed to represent bull horns, the ornamental decoration on top of the building became known as the Horns of Consecration. Evans uncovered the famous bull leaping fresco, which led him and many others to believe that Minoans clearly incorporated bulls into some sort of dangerous ritual. You can find reproductions of this fresco in Minoan ruins all over Odyssey's Greece. Knossos, especially in its ruined state, was not easy to navigate. In fact, it was rather maze-like. Couple this with a dangerous bull leaping ritual, and suddenly the myth of King Minos condemning people to death by feeding them to a minotaur hidden inside of a labyrinth begins to take shape. With more than 1300 years separating the Minoans from Cassandra and Alexios, it's easy to see how the myth of the Minotaur could seep into their culture, become twisted, and maybe even take physical form. Visit Knossos today and you'll be greeted by a network of ruins. What remains standing was rebuilt by Evans and his team. As a civilization that precedes classical Greece by more than 1,000 years, the Minoans were incredibly advanced, as the Palace of Knossos featured buildings 4 stories tall with built-in plumbing and rudimentary climate control. Minoan ruins are easy to spot in-game thanks to their unique columns, which are actually thinner at the base. Made of wood, no original columns survive to this day. Much of what we know of the Minoans was learned by studying what they left behind, since archaeologists are unable to read their language. Frescoes like these are all that archaeologists have left to decipher, and can be seen in various underground ruins in-game. Given that they were the only form of communication we're able to interpret from the Minoans, They provide insight into Minoan culture, ritual, and clothing. Like the legendary Theseus, you'll have the opportunity to explore the labyrinth and slay the mythical Minotaur. But remember, like nearly all myths, the Minotaur is grounded in the reality of the real-life Minoan civilization.